Welcome to FrankensteinsFabrics tutorials. This tutorial is how to do binding. As you can see, I've got my small bench, my medium cutting mat, my fabric, which I've folded over twice, so it comes off the bolt folded once. Now I've folded it again because I'm working small. Normally I don't like to do this because it ends up with curves and bows in this where it's folded, but for this demonstration I can get away with it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to cut a binding strip and discuss a few different techniques with that, a few different widths and a few different ideas on binding, and then I will show you how to piece your binding together. And then what I'll do is I will stop this video and then I will create a second video with how to attach your binding to your quilt top once you've quilted it. So it'll be a two-part video just so I can get both sections clear for everybody, and that way it's not so rough on the long video on YouTube and all of that kind of thing. So first of all, traditional binding is usually 2.5 inches. Now if you can see on this ruler, 1, 2, and this dotted line is our 1/2 inch. Now traditionally that is for machine sewing your binding onto the front of your quilt and then flipping it around to the back and hand sewing it down. I don't do that. I don't like hand sewing. It's just one of my little quirks, each to their own. But that's how I work. Now, I also do a lot of machine bindings because a lot of my customers and a lot of quilts that I make people for get thrown in the washing machine. So I want them to last a bit longer. They're going to be knocked around. You know, they're kids' blankets, that kind of thing. Kids are going to use them. They're going to be rough house with. So I make it so it's going to be as durable as possible. So machine binding front and back saves a lot of grief in the long run. So I normally cut my bindings at 3 inches because I'm machine sewing front and back. Also, because I'm doing it at 3 inches, I am not trimming my quilt top and wadding and backing down to the line. A lot of times you will see in instructions, trim back to 1/8 of an inch from the stitch line. If you are not careful, you will cut into your mitered corners, and then when you flip it over you will have a hole or a rough spot or a lump or something goes wrong on those corners. So this is why I cut them at 3, because it saves all of that hassle. It means that I can just sew my binding on, flip it round, sew it down again, and it's done. So this is me binding quite quick, and it's just one of those things. So we'll see how we go. Okay, so now I'm right-handed, so I cut with my ruler to the left, rotary cutter in my right hand, and my straight edge is facing to the left. So what I normally do is if I've got a rough edge, I'll trim it up over onto the right, flip my fabric over, and then come back to here. So what I'm doing is I'm going to cut 2 3-inch strips, lining it up with my right angles. So across the bottom here on the ruler is where my fold is, and then the 90-degree straight up the side here on my straight edge. Now I don't need any of this, so that can go away. Now, some people like to cut their selvages off before they start. That's up to you. I don't, because it's just easier. Trim them off when I'm ready. It's not really, it's much of a muchness. So now what we do is we take our selvages off. I'm a little rough with those because it doesn't really matter if they're selvages, it's okay. So, safety lock back on your rotary cutter, ruler off to the side. Now, binding strips. So, one strip out, and you get your second strip, so right sides together, like this. So what we have here is we're creating our 45-degree angle across here. Now you can pin if you choose. I don't. I've been sewing for so long now that pinning doesn't always happen. There are circumstances where I will pin, but that's totally up to me and whenever I feel like it. So what I'll do now is I'll just set the machine up and I will show you the next part. Okay, now I've got grey thread on my machine, so I'm not going to worry about changing it to black because it's so close anyway. So what I do is line them up so you've got a straight edge and a straight edge. Put your needle down into your corner, find your other corner, and I put my finger there. That way I've got a visual guide. If you don't feel comfortable just sewing straight off, use a pen, marking pencil, whatever you feel comfortable with, and mark your diagonal line. That's totally up to you, but as I said before, whatever makes you comfortable when you're sewing will make the job much easier for you, and you'll be happy to do it. So here we go. Okay, so we cut our threads and we have our seam. So as you can see, it's all joined. Now, some people will use a rotary cutter for this next step. I don't, because it's pointless lining all of this up when you can do it by eye. So I cut roughly 1/4 of an inch away from that seam line, and so that's made there now. Now what I will do is I will press this open, and then I will fold my binding in half with wrong sides together and press, and so that's your binding strip. So I will write up the calculation so you can calculate how much binding you need for each quilt, and that way you can see how many strips you need to cut. So this is just joining 2 strips because I'm only making something small for the purposes of this tutorial. So I will iron this, stop the video, and then I'll move on to the next section. So I'll see you in part 2. Thanks for stopping by.